let's talk about subtracting whole numbers. Okay, so just like addition, we can name the parts of subtraction. So for the example where we have 6 minus 4 is equal to 2, we call 6 the minuend, 4 is called the subtractand, and 2 is called the difference. And to be completely honest, I don't really keep this information stored in my head, minuend and subtractand. I do make note that the answer of a subtraction problem is the difference. We have subtraction properties involving 0. The first property is that if you take a number and subtract it by itself, the answer is always 0. So for example, 8 minus 8 is 0. The other example is what happens when you subtract 0. So you take any number and subtract 0 and nothing changes. So for example, 36 minus 0 is still 36. Now, if you recall, when we talked about addition, we had the commutative property, saying that it doesn't matter the order that you add things. So the question is, does that same property hold for addition? Well, let's find out. So here we have a question. Does 8 minus 3 equal 3 minus 8? And the answer is going to be no. 8 minus 3 is equal to a positive 5. And we haven't talked about this yet, but 3 minus 8 is equal to a negative 5. And positive 5 does not equal negative 5. So, does the commutative property work for addition? No. What about the associative property? Is it going to work for subtraction? And the answer again is going to be no. So take, for example, 5 minus, open parentheses, 3 minus 2. So this is equivalent to 5 minus 1. And 5 minus 1 is 4. Now what happens if you do 5 minus 3 in parentheses and then subtract from that 2? Well, 5 minus 3 is 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. And note that 4 does not equal 0. So again, we see a property that worked for addition doesn't work for subtraction. The last thought is subtraction and addition and subtraction are inverse operations, and we can check our subtraction problems by going back and adding. So let's do some examples. Find each difference. When we hear that word difference, that means to subtract. Alright, 18 minus 18, well that's 0. Without any thought whatsoever, that's 0 because we've talked about how anything minus itself is 0. Anything minus itself is 0. Problem number 15, 9,143 minus 122. When it comes to subtracting problems, we want to line up the digits according to their place value. So 9143 minus 122. Now this is going to be a nice problem because we're not going to have to borrow. 3 minus 2 is 1. 4 minus 2 is 2. 1 minus 1 is 0. And 9 minus 0 is 9. So our final answer is 9,021. Now, let's look at problem number 16, 697 minus 49. Again, make sure that you line up your digits according to their place value. And here you can see we have a problem. 7 minus 9. Well, we can't take 9 from 7. So what we have to do is we have to borrow. So we're going to come over here to this 9 in the tens place, and we're going to borrow. That 9 becomes an 8. We're going to borrow 1. That 7 becomes 17, and now we can talk about subtracting 9. 17 minus 9 is 8. And then we're going to do 8 minus 4 is 8. 6 minus 0 is 6. So our final answer is 688. Problem number 17. We have 1,000 minus 762. Again, make sure that you line up your digits according to place value. And you can see here our first problem, how do we subtract 2 from 0? Well, we can't take 2 from 0, so we have to borrow. Now, in the previous example, we borrowed from the tens place because there is something to borrow from, but we can't borrow from 0. We can't borrow from that 0, so we have to come all the way over here to this 1 in the thousands place, and we have to borrow from it. So if I borrow 1 from 1, we have 0. Now this 0 becomes a 10, and now we can borrow from 10. If we borrow from 10, that becomes a 9. So that 0 becomes 10. We're going to borrow from that 10 to get 9, and this becomes 10. So now we can take 2 from 10, that's going to be 8. We can take 6 from 9, that's going to be 3. We can take 7 from 9, and that's going to be 2. And our final answer is 238. And I think this would be a good opportunity to showcase the checking process. To check subtraction, we're going to add in the opposite direction. So if 1,000 minus 726 is 238, then we should be able to show that 238 plus the 762 is equal to the 1,000. And let's see, 8 plus 2 is 10, carry the 1. 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 6 is 10, carry the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus a 7 is 10, carry the 1, and we get 1,000. And that's how we check.